Okay. So our season's pretty much over with at this point. Lamore's done, videos are edited and out, and our awards banquet just got done last night. So at this point, all that's now left is rebuild season. Now I love rebuild season. I think it is the most fascinating time trying to go back and forth with new ideas, putting new parts in the car, kind of experimenting with new things. So I'd like to take you guys on the journey of it. So I don't really know how far in depth I'd like to take it or how many of these videos I'm going to do. All I know is this car has to be stripped down to a bare frame by the end of the video. We should probably get started pretty soon. But first thing first, this is probably not a good color sweatshirt to wear. So let me try an editing trick just to kind of switch things up. Alright, I guess I'm not a big enough channel for that yet. So let's try this. Okay, that's better. So this really isn't my first rodeo. I've done this a few times before. My process is made up of these steps. I'll get my trusty stick here. Stuff in the way. Front end, rear end, engine, electronics, and fuel. Those are my 6 main steps here while tearing the car down. Stuff in the way consists of GoPro mounts, wing stuff, both top wing and nose wing mounts, all the GoPro stuff obviously, and the seat. The seat is really in the way. Big old kink in the system. Next is the front end. So this is everything except shocks and the torsion assembly. I will take everything out as one big chunk. So all the radius rods, all the tie rods, panhard, steering arm, track arm, everything here comes out. One big piece. Same thing with the rear end. Everything except the torsion assembly and the shocks come out. Obviously you have to take off brake rods and watch links and the birdcage radius rod on the other side. But same general idea, everything comes out all at once in one big subassembly. The engine is next, so that includes all the headers and the fuel injection. I will take off all the electronics, all the fuel lines, all the chain assembly, everything there comes off when the motor comes out. Next will be all the electronics, because I can take all that and the dash out at once without really any big obstacles in the way. Fuel is really easy to do last. The seat's out, the engine is out, the rear end is out, and everything, including all the fuel lines, all the plumbing, and the fuel pump and filters are totally in the open. You can just tear them out in one piece. Okay, so as soon as all that's taken off, there's obviously a couple of miscellaneous things here and there that I gotta pull, including like steering assemblies and just other things here and there. But really, that's all it is. It's 6 main steps plus a little miscellaneous things after. I mean, it's easiest part of the entire rebuild season. Once I have all the sub-assemblies kind of taken out and in like good order, I can pull those apart and clean them as I go. I'm sure you're tired of hearing me talk, so why don't we just get to it here. Okay, so the majority of the first stage is done. Really, the only thing I have left is to take care of the bumpers all the way around the car. But those really aren't all that in the way for right now. So right now, we can probably just go over the board here. And mark the first step as complete. Alright, it is a new day with new opportunities. I came back earlier this week, took out all the bumpers, Nerf bars, and my belts. And now my next step is to get this front end out. I really like this camera angle. I might do the time lapse from up there. This part is easy peasy. I'm probably going to start by taking out the torsion assembly, and all the arms and stops and torsion bars and everything. Then probably move on to the shocks. And then I have all of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bolts to undo, and this thing should just slide right out. Albeit I am leaving the radius rods on the front end, so I probably have to do a little bit of Tetris to get this thing out, but I should be able to just flip one up and out. There is this long section in the chassis here from the raised mid rails that I can probably use to my advantage here. I've always taken off the radius rods first and then put them on after, but I think I can get away with it just as is. I'm gonna find out.
Yeah.
So some may be wondering why I'm not using impact driver to take all these out, even though it would save a huge amount of time while taking everything off. And instead I'm going with the standard 9/16 wrench and going slow and taking my time here. And that is because 90% of the bolts on this car are titanium fasteners like this one. And the thing about titanium is it really doesn't like heat or friction or lots of fast movement, because it tends to gall or thermally fuse to the opposite face it is sitting in, such as female threads. So something like an impact driver, where it's impacting a bolt very fast for a very short period of time or distance, it likes to generate a lot of heat and easily strips these things right out. It's kind of like stainless fasteners where you really have to take your time with them. So instead of junking a $1 to $3 bolt like this, you're better off just taking your time and just massaging this thing right out. I do use either like an anti-seize or a lithium grease to kind of help me out, and it just keeps the threads from not getting dry, because again, titanium really hates touching stuff. So any extra amount of time or patience or steps I take in preserving these bolts is better. And if you compare like cost and weight saving, like tie bolts are fantastic. So I want to preserve these as long as I can and get the most life out of them, because I really don't want to spend that $1 to $3 a bolt, you know, every time I take this thing apart. So everything is undone. All the radius rods are off, brake lines are disconnected, steering bolts are out. So all I have to do now is just slip the thing right out. Now, I think if I rotate the axle forward 90 degrees and tip the left side radius rod up, it should just slide right out. I think this is easier than it looks. But theoretically, there we go. Slip right out. So now I have a front end in my hand and I have to go find somewhere to put it. All I have to really do is take out the nylon torsion bar bushings, some of the panels, and just a couple other miscellaneous things here and there before I move on to the rear end. Now the rear end is about the same thing, it's just a couple different bolts, a couple different wrench sizes. So fundamentally it's all the same. So I just kind of have to do it now. Now back here at the rear end, the most tedious part of the operation is going to be getting rid of the chain off the axle. Now on this car, we do use a captive system with a guide block instead of chain guards on the sides of the sprockets like our old design did. This just saves a little bit of rotating weight. All I have to do here is undo 4 bolts, and this entire nylon block just pulls right off. After the chain is off, I have to undo the torsion rack assembly, take off both shocks, and undo 1, 2, and 3 bolts. After that is done, I will pull the 2 pins on the Watts link here and here, and this thing should just slide right out. Now I have to be a little bit careful on this one because it is bigger. I cannot just flip the radius rods up and pull it out of the chassis. There is not much difference from here towards the front end, so it should be just a quick undo and pull out. Okay, so this thing is in here loose. Everything is disconnected on each side. All the arms are off, all the bars are out. Cables are unhooked at this point. So now all I have left is to manhandle this thing out of there. It isn't too hard, it's a substantial amount heavier than the front end, but more stuff on it. Alright, let's pull this thing out. I'm going to hold on to the watch link while I do this, so it doesn't flop around and get in the way. Okay, this could have been a little bit smoother, but it came out nicely. I have honestly struggled with these more than that, so just set this down and get it ready for cleaning later. This car is starting to look really empty. At this point, all I'm going to do next is take off the radius rods here, including the brake rod, put it back on the rear axle for storage, make sure all the bolts are back in the chassis so I know where they go for at least a little bit longer, and then move on the list from there. So that'll be easy. Okie dokie. So, my next step forward after the rear end is going to be engine. Engine's simple, but it's kind of tedious. So, header stay on, injection stay on, but everything else comes off. That includes wiring, fuel lines, clutch, and a couple other miscellaneous things here and there, such as throttle cables and so forth. So really, all this has to go, all this has to go, the clutch and the plumbing up here by the radiator needs to be taken off, and the throttle cable needs to be disconnected. So while we're over here working on the engine, I would like to highlight something Stallard specific about the engine mounting system that I think is done exceptionally well. The turnbuckle on the Stallard engine plates only uses 1.5 inches of the original OEM mount off the engine casting. The rest of it over here in this section is actually cut off. This is super nice because you're not having a big long steel bolt right here or all thread that you're compressing two different sections of mount, which you could possibly crack either this side or that side off. You're losing all this weight, including the steel all thread, and you're combining all your turnbuckle and mounting system into one little section right here. Now obviously it is ran back to a bolt onto the cage, but everything here is super straightforward and simple, although it is just a touch nerve-wracking cutting off this part of the engine because it is irreplaceable. So now that the motor is unhooked and free, I can come underneath and get the 4 bolts that are hooking the engine plates onto the bottom of the frame. Now, these motors in particular don't weigh a ton, even with all the headers and the injection still on it, and I can lift it out by myself, and I've done it before, but for my safety and the engine's safety, I should probably get some help on doing this. So with the engine being out of the car now, I can finally get to the electronics. Now we're kind of on our home stretch here, as there isn't really that many big tasks left besides the fuel, although it's just a couple of mounts here and there and drain the fuel out of the tank. The electronics is a really simple process. It's 4 Zeus buttons, both 2 in the tray and 2 on the dash, and I have to unhook the battery and unmount the wing slider. After that, it's just pulling it out of the center of the car and putting it on my cart. Next, I'll probably move on to steering and getting the radiator out of here. Then pedals and floorboards, nylon bushings, adjusters, shifter, and whatever else I find on the way. Now that the dash and the electronics are out, my next step is the radiator. Now, Stallard radiators are not mounted systems, they are captive. And in that case, they have a tray down here which they sit in, and they are held in place by an aluminum cowling up above, which is fastened by 2 Zeus buttons. Once these two buttons are undone, the radiator lifts out of the car upwards. We're kind of in the last stages of teardown right now, and this thing's getting really close to being a bare frame, so put another hour or two into it tonight, and hopefully I can get the majority of it done. Alright, now all we have left is steering and fuel to do. Both of these are really easy, just 4 bolts out of the steering and the whole thing comes out. And the fuel cell is just drain all the fuel, make sure the lines are dry and everything. Both of these shouldn't take too long, and really that's looking like I'm going to be done tonight. So I'm kind of glad it's taken a lot longer than I expected it to. So this thing is pretty much bare. Now there is one last step I have to do, and this is honestly the trickiest and most scientific part of this entire teardown. So let's do this real quick. All I'm doing here is popping the nylon bushings out of the torsion tubes. Oh yeah, that's how it's done. Old radius rod. The teardown is finally complete. As you can see, this thing is filthy. So I gotta go through and give this thing a really nice cleaning and get this thing ready for paint. I severely underestimated how much time this video would take to make. If you guys made it this far, please let me know what you think. This is totally uncharted territory for me, and any recommendations I can do for next video is going to be greatly appreciated. The next episode is going to be all about frame. This is chassis touch-up, chassis painting, repairs, and updates, including modernized safety bars and so forth. So that one shouldn't be as long as this one. And I really got to say thank you for sticking around, and I hope you guys like this one. So expect more content kind of like this. I have a ton of ideas I can do, so I'm pretty motivated to get those rolling here, especially with winter break coming up. All right, that's enough. I'm out of here.